Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the attending of a press conference of a Gaza Tribunal. For the past 3 days, we've been having panels, discussions, and academic opinions on happenings in Israel and Palestine. Due to that, today it's time to present the declaration that has been given and will be given to all of you and to the rest of the world. So in the name of the Gaza Tribunal and in the name of the President, Richard Falk, who unfortunately couldn't be here physically but is with us online, here is University Professor Penny Green, who will lead you through the day today. Professor, please.
Thank you very much, Merima. It gives me enormous pleasure to basically conclude the Gaza Tribunal. I'm going to hand over to our president, Professor Richard Falk, who is going to introduce the Declaration of Sarajevo that the Gaza Tribunal declares. He's going to make a few opening remarks, and then I'm going to read a summary prepared by Craig McIver in relation to the declaration. And then we'll open up for questions from the press. So can I call on Richard now to make a 5-minute opening set of remarks?
And I'm deeply regretting not being present to share this final session of the Sarajevo meeting of the Gaza Tribunal. The purpose, as Penny suggested, is to introduce the Sarajevo Declaration. This text represents the culmination of 3 intense days of meetings here in Sarajevo, featuring survivor testimony, analysis by experts, and a series of brilliant reports written by the members of the 3 chambers. The Sarajevo Declaration is the most authoritative expression of the perspective of the Gaza Tribunal, a perspective that represents a civil society initiative with its own integrity and identity as an actor. It is not a court in the conventional sense understood in national or international settings. It is less bound by technical rules, no pretense of impartiality, and above all, more dedicated to moral judgments and the pursuit of justice than the mere pronouncement of legalities at stake. What we have in the form of the Sarajevo Declaration is a consensus document produced as a collective, by a collective process that was overseen by Craig McIver, but drew on comments drawn from the membership, not only of the steering committee of the project, but also of its advisory policy council, and indeed all those who are members of the Gaza Tribunal as an operational undertaking. In the course of drafting and conceiving of this declaration, many diverse inputs were incorporated. And so it does represent a collective expression of this consensus that underlies our efforts to respond to the horrors of the Gaza genocide. And we must not lose sight of the fact that our overriding purpose is to respond as peoples of conscience and globally oriented to the tragedy that is unfolding in the West Bank and has spilled over to the tragedy unfolding in Gaza that has spilled over to the West Bank and the countries in the region, and is a unprecedented example of genocide as a process that has attempted to destroy the identity and even obstruct the presence of the Palestinian people in their own country. And it is a declaration that represents for the tribunal an interim document. It looks forward to the final session that will be at the end of October in Istanbul, and will incorporate the views of a jury of conscience, which underscores our commitment to justice and to the recognition of the resilience and resistance of the Palestinian people to this unspeakable assault that has gone on now for more than 19 months. And we should not conceive of the Palestinian people as merely victimized, although they have been atrociously victimized. They are also asserting their basic rights, above all, the right to self-determination, which has been denied to them for the past century, not just a matter that has risen to the surface since October 7. We hope that the declaration leads us to a future in which solidarity initiatives with the struggle of the Palestinian people become active expressions of commitment and engagement to a just solution for the endeavors of the Palestinian liberation movement. And it poses for us the question of what should be done and what should be done next in our undertakings. So I invite Penny back to the podium to read a summary of this inspirational document that attempts to give us all a sense of direction and a disclosure of our commitments and engagements and our aspirations.
In the Declaration of Sarajevo, the Gaza Tribunal declares our collective moral outrage at the continuing genocide in Palestine, and our solidarity with the people of Palestine, our commitment to working with partners across global civil society to end the genocide, and to ensure accountability for perpetrators and enablers, redress for victims and survivors, the building of a more just international order, and a free Palestine. In the declaration, we call out and condemn the myriad crimes of the Israeli regime. We demand an immediate end to those crimes, including the occupation, the siege, the apartheid, and the genocide, and freedom for Palestinian prisoners. We defend UNRWA and other humanitarian actors on the ground and demand accountability for the attacks on them. We call on all governments and on regional and international organisations to act, and we denounce those who have been complicit, from states to media corporations and others. In the declaration, we denounce the wave of persecution and crackdowns on human rights defenders, peace activists, students, academics, workers, professionals. And we honour those who stand up, who despite this persecution have had the courage and moral convictions to stand up and speak out. And we reject the unjust tactic of smearing as anti-Semites or supporters of terrorism all those who dare to speak up against the Israeli regime. We express our conviction that the struggles against all forms of racism, bigotry and discrimination necessarily includes the equal rejection of all forms of Islamophobia, anti-Arab and anti-Palestinian racism, anti-Semitism, Zionism, apartheid and settler colonialism, and we commit to fighting all such scourges. We also reject the destructive ideology of Zionism as the official state ideology of the Israeli regime, of the forces that colonized Palestine and established the Israeli state on its ruins, and of pro-Israel organizations and their proxies today. Instead, the declaration insists, in the words of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights, and that there are no exceptions to this rule. The Tribunal calls in the declaration for decolonization across the land and an end to the ethno-supremacist order and the replacement of Zionism with a dispensation founded on equal human rights for Christians, Muslims, Jews and others. Further in the declaration, we honour the courageous resistance and resilience of the Palestinian people and the movement of millions standing in solidarity with them. We reaffirm the right of the Palestinian people to resist in accordance with international law. We recall that the Palestinian right to self-determination is jus cogens and erga omnes and is non-negotiable and axiomatic. We respect Palestinian aspirations and recognise full Palestinian agency and leadership over all the decisions affecting their lives. In the text, we also express our grave concern at the state and direction of international relations, international politics, and international institutions, their failings and the attacks on those international institutions that have challenged genocide and apartheid in Palestine. We demand immediate action to isolate, contain, and hold accountable the Israeli regime through universal boycott, divestment, sanctions, a military embargo, suspension from international organisations, and the prosecution of its perpetrators, individual criminal accountability for all those implicated in war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, gross violations of human rights or complicity. We applaud the International Court of Justice for its ongoing historic genocide case against the Israeli regime and for its landmark advisory opinions, and South Africa for bringing the genocide case to the ICJ. And we call for expediting the case of the ICC against Israeli perpetrators, for state parties to meet their obligations to arrest them, and for the US to cease its persecution of the court. And we call for full implementation of the pronouncements of the two courts in The Hague and the historic UNGA resolution of September 2024. We also express our admiration for the independent special procedures of the UN Human Rights Council, for their expert contributions and for their strong and principled voices in holding the Israeli regime to account and defending the human rights of the Palestinian people, as well as for UN agencies that have acted to defend the rights of the Palestinian people, foremost among them UNRWA. Finally, in the Declaration of Sarajevo, we warn that the world is approaching a dangerous precipice, the front edge of which is in Palestine, and that both key international organisations and most countries of the world have failed in defending the human rights of the Palestinian people and in responding to the Israeli regime's genocide in Palestine. And we conclude the declaration by declaring, and I quote, "The challenge of justice now falls to the people of conscience everywhere, to civil society and to social movements, to all of us. As such, our work in the coming months will be dedicated to meeting this challenge. Palestinian lives are at stake. The international moral and legal order is at stake. We must not fail. We will not relent." And there ends the declaration. Thank you. I'm now going to open the press conference. We have members of the Steering Committee of the Gaza Tribunal before you. Could you please direct your questions through me to the panel? Who would like to ask the first question? Lauren.
I want to know, how will the report and your
Can we-
findings...
We need a microphone.
Hello. How will you be disseminating and sharing this report? And with Mr. Link there, how will you be getting through to the United Nations, and what do you actually hope to produce as an outcome? Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm going to hand that one over to Michael Link. Please give him a microphone.
Sorry, you have to stand up because of the press. I'm sorry. Thank you. Leave this to me, and you have the mics over there. Yeah? No, he has to be because of the mics over the press. They will be taking the statements like this. Yeah, thank you. Please, sorry. Yeah, it's okay.
So the question goes to the impact of the declaration and where it's going to be heard. The declaration is detailed, it is comprehensive, it expresses, I think, the wish with respect to the Gaza Tribunal about the many facets of what's going on in Palestine and with respect to Gaza. It's going to be heard, I think, because of you, the media that is here, around the world. There's been a lot of interest in many different parts of the world on the proceedings over the last 3 days. The impact and what makes us different, if you like, from what the work of the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice is that we're speaking unfiltered with not only voices of experts, but also the voices of the victims of what is going on now in Palestine and in Gaza. And I think because those words, I think, are being heard coming from people who've gone through the immense suffering in Gaza, going through the genocide in Gaza, I think that's going to be heard primarily by civil society, and by populations around the world. We're hoping it's going to move them for further action on their own governments and with respect to what's going to happen at the United Nations. Remember that the vast majority of countries who are represented at the United Nations are on side with the question of Palestine. They recognize that international law is on the side of the people of Palestine. They recognize that these issues with respect to the illegality of the settlements, of the illegality of annexation, of the right of the Palestinian people for self-determination, are among the most settled questions in international law, in international politics. We're giving, if you like, an extra boost to that in the work that we're doing.
Thank you, Michael. And just in response to the second part of that question, the declaration and all of the evidence and testimony that was produced during the 3 days of our Sarajevo meeting will be held on the Gaza Tribunal website, so it will be available there in terms of dissemination. It will also be available to the United Nations, and we very much hope that they pick it up. But we also hope that other media outlets take it up and disseminate, and we will be disseminated widely through our own networks. Thank you. Do we have another question from the press? Please.
I myself was in I've myself reported from Palestine after October 7th, and my question is, in terms of media, I've heard the panelists yesterday, what is the role of the media in terms of this declaration and promoting it, actually, because we are seeing that media is actually the biggest factor in the West, which is completely denying the events in Israel. How will this declaration impact the general public, not just in the Middle East or in the East, but also in the West? Because at the same time, we are seeing more protests, pro-Palestinian protests in the West than we are seeing in the Middle East itself.
Lara, may I ask you to answer that question? Thank you.
Your question is about the role of media and how the declaration adopted today is going to be used by media. And so we submit that the media has a tremendous role to play in amplifying the Sarajevo Declaration. We're calling on media worldwide to do their jobs which unfortunately for the corporate Western media, they have not been doing for the last 19 months, in fact, for many decades now. What we've seen in the last 19 months is that the Western corporate media has unfortunately been complicit in the ongoing genocide in Gaza. They have disseminated atrocity propaganda. They have continuously silenced the voices of Palestinian journalists who are risking their lives every single day to provide us with evidence of what is taking place in Gaza. They have, if they even invite Palestinians onto their programs, not treated them as equals. They have continuously dehumanized Palestinians. They interrogate them, they treat them with suspicion, and they do not recognize that Palestinians are credible narrators of their own lived experiences. And so, unfortunately, if we're here today, it's because the media has tremendously failed in their role to tell the truth about what is happening in Palestine. They have contributed to the massive dehumanization of the Palestinian people. And so today we are calling for a change in course. It is not too late to speak up. There are 2 million people in Gaza today who insist on living, who wake up every single day and insist on the right to live and have their self-determination rights fulfilled, rights which unfortunately have been denied for far too long. And so it is imperative that they work to change, unfortunately, their role in the complicity of the Gaza genocide. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was a lovely speech from you. I wanted to ask you from, I'm an ex-student from this university, and we have been seeing United Nations, International Criminal Court, and the Court of Justice been failing forever in many different areas where genocide is happening, when human rights are being denied. And when we're talking about taking the declaration to the United Nations to hold them accountable, what will be done from the civil society, from the media, and from your side to keep to hold accountable, to United Nations being accountable, or International Criminal Court and Criminal Court of Justice being accountable for being silent, for keeping the silence forever? This is my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody want to answer that, or shall I? I think that the very purpose of this tribunal is because of what Lara was saying in relation to the media and relation to the sort of, if you like, the dominant hegemony which operates in relation to Palestine. So the idea of a people's tribunal is to, in effect, run parallel to the procedures that are taking place in the ICC and the ICJ. We know that the wheels of international justice move incredibly slowly, and that they are selective. We applaud, as we said earlier, the role of South Africa in bringing the case against Israel to the ICJ. But we have to do much, much more than that. And our tribunal runs parallel to those processes. And what we believe in is the power of civil society to embark on campaigns, already that they are marching in their millions across the world. What we are encouraging and what we are hoping to animate with a little bit more agility is the commitment to the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement, to an arms embargo on Israel, to sanctions against Israeli officials, and to support organizations like the Hind Rajab Foundation, which is pursuing Israeli war criminals as they travel the world on their holidays. These are the kind of actions that the Gaza Tribunal is hoping to encourage and support, and by recognizing the power of civil society as really the only power which can effect change in relation to the state's crimes against the Palestinian people. So I hope that answers your question, but for us, civil society is the mechanism, the most powerful mechanism by which we can hope to prevent and stop this appalling genocide in Palestine. There's a hand here.
Hi, this is Gökhan from Charity World. Since my colleague Samir has mentioned about the media's role in covering this Gaza genocide, as far as we know, we have the information that this Gaza tribunal will have another session, probably, I guess, in September or October in Istanbul. So what are you guys planning to do for this latest and last session, so that the press and the media's role, maybe at the end of this final version of the Gaza tribunal, will be affecting the outcome of this massacres, and will be able to stop this, at least people to understand that this has to be taken into account, and acting as to stop this genocide going with this regime in Israel. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone from the panel want to answer that? Or? Thank you very much for that question. Yes, there will be a final hearing of the Gaza Tribunal. At this stage, we will certainly have a jury of conscience that will be made up of representatives from civil society, from the law, from academia, public intellectuals who will explore the evidence that we have gathered, for example, in the last 3 days. But more than that, it will make judgment on the various elements that we have discussed in these last 3 days. We began this tribunal not exploring whether or not Israel had committed genocide, or whether the United States and the United Kingdom had been party to that genocide. We began this tribunal on the premise that a genocide has taken place. There is more than enough evidence. More than enough. There is a vast quantity of evidence that is being gathered by civil society organizations, by Palestinian groups, by scholars, by a range of NGOs that demonstrate that genocide is taking place, that Israel is a perpetrator of apartheid, of settler colonialism, of genocide. That does not need to be established. That has been established. So what we are doing here, and what we will do at the final hearing, is to explore in greater detail and get a sort of a very firm commitment from civil society to end the current genocide and to proceed in a way that attempts to ensure that we will see no more genocides. We can't guarantee that. The world we live in suggests to us that that seems an impossibility at this stage. But people of conscience around the world, and I hope that is what the Gaza Tribunal represents, the vast majority of people around the world are horrified by the images of burning babies, of burning Palestinian babies, of women hugging their shrouds, the shrouds of their children, of Palestinian men kneeling half naked, humiliated by the Israeli regime. The world knows this to be genocide. And the world, ordinary people, are totally opposed. The problem is the powers that be, and it's our attempt to give, I suppose, to reinvigorate civil society, to give civil society a greater validation and increased credibility in the struggle against genocide, and particularly the struggle against Israel's crimes in Palestine. Okay.
This is Hajara from Hayat Television, and my question is, we are witnesses that demands from UN was broken by Israeli forces in March when ceasefire was demanded. How are you planning on dealing with such obstacles if that happens again? Because you are demanding ceasefire and aid and everything. How are you going to solve problems if they are not respected?
Thank you. I'm going to hand this one to Michael Link.
Try to build this up. Sorry, to be heard better. Thank you.
You've asked the question with respect to the ceasefire. We've had 2 ceasefires so far over the almost 20 months of this genocide. The second ceasefire, as you pointed out, was unilaterally broken by Israel in March. The demand from us, the demand from civil societies around the world, the demand by voices at the United Nations is to restore the ceasefire but make it permanent and durable. Let's keep in mind that last June, almost 12 months ago, the Security Council of the United Nations adopted a resolution drafted and promoted by the United States, Resolution 2735 on the 10th of June, asking for a complete, immediate, and durable ceasefire with respect to this. The United States' role in this, either under the Biden administration or under the Trump administration, has been one, the word that comes to my mind is duplicitous. Either the United States issues vetoes with respect to ceasefire resolutions at the United Nations, as it has done 5 times over the course of the last almost 20 months, or it allows ceasefire resolutions to be adopted by the Security Council, and then there's nothing to put them into effect. That was passed on the 10th of June. The Biden administration was in power for another 7.5 months without putting the ceasefire into effect, and didn't come into effect until, as we know, early in 2024, in January. So what are we to do, I guess, as people of conscience, as legal scholars, as scholars of the Middle East, as people concerned about human rights with respect to that, is to demand that what our states and what the United Nations puts on paper, that they wind up honoring that, honoring those words. War is not to be fought without rules, and when there is an unjust war, as occurred over the last 20 months, where there's been war crimes, crimes against humanity, and now increasingly voices saying, yes, it's genocide. We have Amnesty International saying that. We have human rights saying that. We have Médecins Sans Frontières saying that. We have 380 writers and poets in Britain the other day issuing a statement saying this is genocide. All of these things, we need to mobilize more and more voices so that the governments of these populations cannot wind up ignoring this anymore. The suffering that moves them moves us as well in terms of what we see with respect to Gaza. Can we move it enough that we can finally end this war? We can finally begin the reconstruction of Gaza, and we can finally make sure it's done in the interest of the people of Gaza. Nothing about them without them with respect to this. Thank you.
Well, let's do the 2 questions more, and then we'll end.
Thank you. Hi, Emily Wilder, freelance reporter. How do you plan for this declaration and the materials from the tribunal to be disseminated to and used by Palestinian civil society in the West Bank and Gaza who are not represented on the tribunal? And do you anticipate a process for getting input ahead of the October 2nd session? Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Wissam, please.
Thank you for that question. And obviously, the important role of Palestinian civil society in the tribunal needs to be underscored. And Palestinian civil society organizations have been represented in the tribunal with statements from the organization I represent, Al-Haq, but also Damir, Badil. And the process, this entire tribunal is really a complement to the efforts of Palestinian civil society as a whole that has been ongoing throughout this genocide in particular, but for decades. And the hope is that this tribunal will serve as a repository for all interested parties that want to contribute and provide information, but also serve as a resource for those that want to utilize the information there in order to enhance and empower all of the collective efforts of both Palestinian and global civil society. Thank you.
There was, yeah.
Thank you. I'm Sumka Buchan. I'm not a journalist, but I'm a researcher, and I'm doing research on the role of civil society basically in the Palestinian-Israeli affair. So my question is, and I believe, as you do, that change will come from civil society. And you are doing your part of the work. Human rights organizations are doing theirs, both Palestinian and international, BDS, students, etc. But how can the Gaza Tribunal contribute to strengthening the movement, making it more structured, so that basically the voices of the people who are against this genocide are strengthened, and that basically civil society creates this firewall that will incite and ignite the change and shift the tide.
Thank you. Lara, do you want to respond to that? Or? Jamil, great.
Thank you for this great question. Obviously, we will want the coordination and cooperation among different civil society organizations so that they are empowered and they pressure their own governments. But one characteristics of this tribunal is its attention to narratives, poisonous narratives that enables genocides or allows people to deny. So this tribunal is also inviting not only journalists, but also historians, academics, intellectuals, politicians, to do their job, to refuse and all these genocidal language and stories and historical myths and lies about Palestinians that dehumanizes them. And in that context, I want to note that our first meeting in Sarajevo was very symbolic because this country also has witnessed a genocide. 30 years ago, and those genocides and the current one in Palestine has some similarity. We failed Bosnian people. We watched it, and we actually allowed perpetrators, Serbian perpetrators, to present their very wrong myths and poisonous lies about Bosnians not belonging to here and being danger to European civilization. And we see something very similar happening with regard to Gaza genocide. So I think our goal is not to do the same mistakes and that global community did with regard to Bosnians. We couldn't prevent the genocide. We might, not only civil society, but everyone to do their job to reject this ideology. All genocide starts in the minds and in language and in perception. So we do want to not only encourage civil society, but public opinion broadly, universities, academics, intellectuals broadly, to really do their job to reject falsehood and lies. Thank you.
This is the final question. Thank you.
I just want to ask one question.
Actually, this person hasn't actually asked a question before, so.
Okay, my name is Asad, and I'm a researcher. My question is actually about the role of United Nations. And if you allow me maybe 1 or 2 minutes just to explain myself what the question is. Yes, I will try myself.
Please make it brief.
If we go back in on the beginning on this, what happened in Palestine, for example, the League of the Nations, they make the resolution 181, right? And by splitting a two-state solution it was the first step of the unjust to the Palestinian people. The second thing, if we see the documents, we will find that the United Nations actually armed the Zionists in the Palestine in that period. And what happened after, for example, the question of the Convention of Prevention and Prosecution, the crime of genocide by Raphael Lemkin. Do we have any document or anything that he condemned this what happened in Palestine? We don't have it. Why? Because the Raphael Lemkin was a Zionist. And we have the documents that he was the chief editor of Zionist newspaper in the Poland, the Zionist World it's called. And
thank you. I think that
until just my question now.
We are there was an extra question.
Okay.
So.
My question is, it's the only the address we have the United Nations about this, or should we maybe try to find the alternative, or maybe to create a new address for this?
That's helpful.
Okay,
in the
thank
sense.
you.
Thank you very much for the question. I'm happy to answer that because as a criminologist, we have worked on alternative definitions of genocide. We don't rely wholly on international law to define state crimes. The crimes committed by states are the most egregious of all crimes. And if we understand genocide as a process and we use historical benchmarks and have a sense of genocide as a process, we know that genocide begins with dehumanization, that it follows a path towards erasure. And there are quite clear phases involved in that path. And the point, I think, is if we approach genocide in that way rather than an event, we have the opportunity, particularly as civil society, when we see a people being dehumanized, systematically dehumanized, institutionally dehumanized, we have an opportunity to step in. The treatment of asylum seekers in the UK, for example, is one such opportunity. When you see people dehumanized and scapegoated and blamed for the ills of the state, then that's a moment, that's a red flag. And so we have other alternative definitions. We don't rely wholly on the United Nations or international legal definitions. We are historians, we are sociologists, we are criminologists, we are political scientists, we are international lawyers. We use those disciplines in order to have a much more holistic understanding of genocide and points of intervention. Thank you.
I really apologize. We have multiple platforms. That's why I just want to get one more question in. In terms of the declaration, Palestine in general is being presented as a Muslim problem. This is not a Muslim problem. This is a problem of humanity right now. How do you intend to implement the declaration, to promote the declaration within religious figures, especially in the United States, which is using the evangelical corpus, promoting the ideas of genocide itself within their speeches, within their preachings at churches? How do we intend to promote this particular declaration among religious leaders, both in the East and the West? Because as we all know, listening to all of you experts here, this is not a matter of a Muslim question, and we are presented in the media, and experts are being discredited in that way. How do you intend to bridge the declaration and promote it amongst religious figures, considering that now we have a new pope? How do we promote this declaration for religious leaders in the world to understand that this is not just a question of the Muslim world?
Thank you for the question.
Thank you, and I apologize
Jamil.
again.
Thank you. This is a great question. So one of our goals in the tribunal is to focus on the narratives, stories, frameworks, ideologies that enables genocide or makes us complicit in genocide. And as you identified, one of these narratives is the so-called clash of civilization narrative, which is now utilized by Israel to justify itself. So instead of presenting this as a question of humanism and universal rights, they present this as a clash between Islam and the Judeo-Christian West. So we hope that we will invite all intellectuals, fair-minded people, academics and journalists and historians to reject the academically discredited, obsolete stories of clash of civilizations and religious conflict. Palestinians include all kinds of people, Christians and also Jewish Arabs. And they have been always the kind of champions of universal rights and humanism in history. So we do recognize that this ideology that you described is actually one way to racialize Palestinians and deny their rights. So part of our goal in our tribunal chamber 3 is to offer clarity to this pollution of terms and concepts and ideas and philosophies. And that also relate to the great question by our colleague on the United Nations. We do know the limitations of the international organizations, that the United Nations was built by great powers as an extension of empire. But we also recognize that eventually United Nations also included the aspirations of colonized people, and people try to change the spirit of the United Nations and reform it. So we want to appeal to that positive, good side of the United Nations that with all of its limitations can still achieve a lot. So as in our speech, Nora Arakat said, is that there are enough laws and international organizations and institutions that can act to prevent the genocide. So we want everybody to do their job. We can mobilize, and we can go beyond that in terms of rejecting these hateful ideologies of clash of civilizations. Thank you.
Are we thinking, saying that's it, right?
We can conclude the press conference and then we can deal with your motion.
Yes,
Is that
and
okay,
individual
Sammy?
questions are also
Yes.
open, so
Yeah.
thank you very much for your attention. And
Thank
thank
you
you
very
for your
much.
interest, and thank you for being part of this really, really important project.
Thank you
Penny,
very
please.
much, Merima, and thank you all for coming. We hope that you will use your voices in the way that Lara talked about to counter the poison, the toxic role that the media has played in in the treatment of Palestinian people in the course of this genocide. So it's up to you and your colleagues. We hope you can persuade them to do the right thing. Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it.